Hi everyone, it's Clive. Welcome to the Mitchell Brewery. It's another lovely sunny day in Nottingham. I've got the boiler on. Let's get brewing. Cheers, happy brewing. Okay, today we're going to make home pale ale. So it's a slightly lower strength, low alcohol strength version than the beer we did last time, which is the home pale IPA. And this is using Maris Otter, crystal malt and some flaked oats. Yes, that's the porridge oats. And for the hops I'm going to use Cascade at the beginning of the boil and then 15 minutes from the end, and then I'm going to use East Kent Goldings, and that's going to go right at the end of the boil to give it some nice aromas. And then during the fermentation I'm going to dry hop with Citra. So let's see how we get on. Something I added the last time was a Camden tablet. Now this is sodium metabisulfite, and what I've done, I've taken one of the tablets and I've crushed it. I'm going to add it into the water in the boiler, and apparently this interacts and neutralises the chlorine in the water. So you can take away some of the risk of any chlorine tastes in your beer. Boiler's just reached 100 degrees C, so I'm just going to turn it off and let that cool to less than 80. In the meantime, I've got my malt here. This is Maris Otter pale malt. This is the backbone of the beer. Most of the sugar that turns into alcohol comes from here. I've also got my crystal malt, the porridge oats, my Cascade and my East Kent Goldings all ready to be mashed up into a beer. So while that sparge water is cooling down, I'm just going to get on and clean and sterilise my fermentation bin. And here we go, this is what I normally use, these Milton sterilising tablets, and as I always say, if it's good enough for babies, it's good enough for beer. So I just add a couple and I fill this up with water and let it do its job. Next I'm going to weigh out my malt, and you can see I'm adding 3.83 kilograms Maris Otter, 226 grams both of crystal malt and flaked oats. These will go into this. This is the mash tun, and then when this is cooled to less than 80 I will add about 8 to 10 litres of this cooled boiled water into here. Pop the lid on and seat it up for an hour and a half, and that will then soak away all the lovely sugars from the malted barley, from the grain, and that sugar obviously ultimately becomes alcohol in the fermentation process. There we go, that's the water at 80. I've added the malt, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to add about 8 litres of this cooled boiled water into here, like I said before. That's 6. Right, let's give this a really good stir. Just you can see there's air in there, so I need to make sure that this is totally mixed up, because what you want this water in contact with all of the grain. You don't want any dry patches in there, because if there's a dry patch, obviously that sugar in that dry patch doesn't go into solution. So I'll do this quickly because I don't want this to lose too much heat. So I'll give this a really solid, thorough mix, and then I'll seal it up and let it do its magic. There you go, that's thoroughly mixed up, so let's seal it up. That's sealed up with my cover just to try and insulate it a bit more, and that'll sit now for an hour and a half to let the water dissolve the sugar from the malt. Now you can see the boiler's looking a bit low, so what I need to do is I need to top this up and get this back up to 100 and then cool to 80 again, so that water then becomes the sparging water. I'll explain what sparging is later. One. Five. There you go, that'll do. So the boiler's refilled, and the tap water is quite cold. It measured at about 8 degrees C first thing this morning, so it's put the temperature right down below 50, so this will take a little while to get back up to boil again. One of my favourite stages in brewing is when you uncover the mash tun, because that's when you start to get all the lovely malty aromas coming out. A bit Ovaltine. Oh, lovely Ovaltine goodness. What I normally do now is I turn the tap on, mash tun, and then just drain off the first flush of sugary solution. At this stage, this is called sweet wort, W-O-R-T. It's quite sediment rich as well, so what I normally do is I'll put this back into here, and this then acts like a filter bed to capture some of those fine particles and hopefully to help clarify the solution. So I'll let that drain for a bit. So let's tip this. Let's tip this back into here. You can see I've attached a tube to the end of the tap of the boiler, and this is a fine rose from a watering can, and I'm going to use this to pass all the cooled board water through the mash. So I'm going to play it across the surface of the mash, and this is called sparging, and what this does is it washes the sugary solution away from the grain and then into one of these fermentation buckets. So if we do this, basically turn that on, I'll just play it across the surface of the grain like this, and I'll just turn the tap back on. And this will take maybe 15 minutes, 15-20 minutes for all this water to pass from here, through here and into there. So this is still sweet wort at this stage. There you go, you can see a bit of a close-up now of what I'm doing. I'm just playing this water across the surface of the grain, trying to keep this grain wet but not sort of deluged. And I've got my sweet wort going into the fermentation bin here. This is how much sweet wort we've managed to get. We've got 20 litres here, plus we've got probably another sort of 5-8 litres in that one. And I'm going to put them back into the boiler and get that up to 100 degrees, and then I can start adding the hops, and that then will convert this sweet wort into bitter wort. Every time I've ever done this, at this stage the sweet wort is 56 degrees, and it's always 56 degrees, it never varies. Go, start adding this back into the boiler. Now the element is covered, I can turn it on. So it won't be long before I start adding the hops, and I've got various containers that I use for putting the hops in. If you look at one of the hops, you can see why I put them in something. Now in the past it was mostly leaf hop that we used. If you look now, you can see that it's mostly something called pellet hops. These things are like compressed dust basically, so when you put them in here, they break right down into a sludge, and it's sort of difficult to get out of the beer. It helps if you put the pellet hops into something like this with a fine mesh or muslin cloth, or this fine mesh cloth as well. And basically that then retains most of that sludge. Not everything, but it does help to keep the beer clear. Going up to 90 degrees. Now, you might be wondering why I've got the fan going. It's February. It's actually quite a nice warm day, but, you know, relatively warm. If you don't have this thing on, the condensation in here will be horrendous and I'll have it dripping off the light fittings. That has happened in the past. So word to the wise, make sure you've got plenty of ventilation. This is my ventilation out the door, it blows all the steam. Seems to work. Well, that's definitely reached 100. In a situation like this where it's at risk of overflowing, a little bit of stir will sometimes do the trick, just to calm things down a bit. Just give it a little bit of a stir, see if that does the business. If we leave the lid off now, when we get more evaporation, and moving the camera to the stirring. There you go, that's a bit better. Time to add the first hop addition, so 25 grams of Cascades, in you go. While the brewing's been going on in the shed, I've been getting the yeast rehydrated. So this was the packet of dried yeast, and what I did, I boiled some water, cooled it to less than 30, so there's 110 mils in there, and then I added the yeast into the top. After 15 minutes gave it a stir, and then it's just sat there, and you can see it's nicely hydrated, and that will then be added to the bitter wort when ready. Next up, I'm just going to weigh out the next addition of hops. So Cascade will go in 15 minutes before the end of the hop boil, and then I'm going to add some East Kent Goldings at the very end when it's cooling down. Okay, we're getting towards the end of the hop boil now, and it's this point that I normally add the copper chiller, and I pop this into the boiler because the boiling wort will sterilise this. So I'll pop that in. Now this is a pretty important bit of kit, and when we're finished it will cool down the boiling bitter wort down to less than 30 degrees in about less than 10 minutes. Otherwise it would take you all day. So here we go. So I need to now attach this to supply water. There we go. Time for the next hop addition, and this is the remainder of the Cascade that's going to go in. And let's just pop that in there for the last 15 minutes of the boil. I'm also going to add one of these bright wort. This is to help drop sediment out as well. So just add one of these tablets. This is made from seaweed. So we're getting towards the end of the hop boil, just about a minute to go. So we're going to add the last of the hop addition. This is the East Kent Goldings. This is nice for aroma. So we'll just pop that in now. And stir. There we go, that's an hour and a half into the hot boil. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's turn off the boiler and turn my fan off. So what I'm going to do now, let's go and turn on the chiller. So if we just follow the pipes, you can see where I need to go. So the chiller took the bitter wort from 100 to 25 degrees in 10 minutes, so you can see the value of this thing. Fantastic. Next, I've got to transfer this into the primary fermentation bin, which is all nicely sterilised, and I'll just then push it through the tap into here. So I will take a sample this is for measuring the gravity of the bitter wort, and then after fermentation you can then measure the gravity at the other end, and that helps you work out the alcohol content. So here are the samples for measuring gravity. If you look, it doesn't look terribly great at this stage, but what you can see is the particles are flocculating and they'll settle out, and that's why you added the bright wort. It should clarify and should get a deposit at the bottom here, so that should all drop out. Here we go, primary fermentation bin now in the house, ready for the yeast to go in. And I'm just going to pitch in the hydrated yeast. And it will sit here now for a week. And I'll come back to it and then put it into the second stage. It's 8 days since I put the beer into the primary fermenter and it's ready. Let's have a quick look. You can see that's done its stuff, and what I've got to do now is transfer this into my pressure barrel. I've just added some finings and I've got my bottles all lined up. So I've got 40 bottles all washed and they're currently sitting in sterilising solution at the minute, so they'll be nice and clean. So let's get on with it. Okay, here we go. I've got the siphon going, and what we've got is a plastic pipe that goes into the fermentation bin, and I've got this plastic pipe, this flexible hose into here. Now, a very simple way of getting a siphon going is to fill this flexible hose all the way up with water, hold your finger over the end, then lower the sort of plastic pipe into the beer, and then hold the end of the flexible hose over a measuring jug like this. Let your finger go, and what that does then is it drags the beer up through the pipe along with it, and then when the beer starts coming through, flick it into the pressure barrel. Job done. Here we go. I'm going to add some of this spray malt. This is basically the same sort of sugar that you get from the malt itself when you do the brewing. I'm going to add 71 grams. I'm going to add some of the beer to put it into solution and add it back in. This sugar then helps to sort of kickstart fermentation again. I'll probably add a little bit more into each of the bottles. I've got a small syringe that I use for that, and maybe 10 mils of a sort of sugary solution goes into each one. Here we go. I'm going to add 10 mils of the sugary solution to each of these bottles. Then I'm going to top up with the beer. So you can see I've got the bottling wand attached to the tap of the pressure barrel. Now this is a really neat device. You can see at the bottom here, that's that sort of little black bit there. When the bottle is raised into it, that is depressed, so that's pressed upwards, and that then releases the beer into the bottle, and you lower the bottle again and it seals. So it's a little sort of tap essentially to fill the bottle up. So if I just do this, see, it's just filling up the bottle. A very simple, clever little device for filling bottles. And then just take it away just before it gets to the top. You can see you end up with a small bit at the top of the bottle. You need to leave that. That's called the ullage, and that allows the beer to ferment in the bottle. Last job is to get the caps onto the bottles, and you use this device to force the caps onto the top of the bottle, and it just sort of presses down onto them. So let's get on with it. And there we go. I've got 38 bottles of beer all ready to be tucked up in a cupboard, and in about 3 or 4 weeks time they'll be ready to drink. So after Easter 2021. Cheers everyone, that's it for this video. Happy brewing everyone.